I sold drugs when I was younger. That harmed my community. It harmed a lot of people, not just the people I sold to. It also affected their families. I do not make excuses, and I can't undo my actions from the past. All I can do now is take ownership of my mistakes and try to help others. Especially as a girl, I knew that selling drugs would be a risky business. I thought I could avoid these risks by being selective and careful. I only sold to people I already knew and trusted. It wasn't that simple though. My customers told other people, and other people contacted me. It was hard to say no to the money. That's how I met Jerry. Jerry had a crush on me. It was obvious, but it felt harmless in the beginning. I think the first red flag was when he started paying me tips. He would pay me for his orders, and then he'd pay me a tip on top of that. One day he asked me my shoe size. I told him clearly, please do not buy me any shoes. He still showed up with a pair of rhinestone heels the next time he was picking up an order. He said he had already bought them and they didn't accept returns. I had pressured and just accepted them. I was a lot more naive then, but I still understand that situation was going to create problems. He was going to expect something in return. It also worried me that he always had power to report me to the police. I used to put my phone on silent every night before going to sleep. I still do that actually. One morning I woke up and saw at least 20 missed calls and more than 50 unread messages. They were all from Jerry. He was mad because he found out I had gone to Disneyland with a boy. His messages said things like, "You were ungrateful. After everything I did for you, you were nothing but a two-faced bitch. You were dead to me. Do not ever contact me again." I wish I could say I wasn't bothered by any of that, but I was. I was afraid of being on his bad side because he could report me. His words were also hurtful, and I felt that. It was also concerning how he knew about me going to Disneyland with my boyfriend. We had kept that off social media. The whole relationship was a secret at the time, but that's a different story. The fact that Jerry blew up my phone was also really unsettling. He had said never to contact him again, so I thought that would be the end of it. I started seeing him everywhere. One day I was sitting at the public library studying. Of all the empty seats, Jerry came in and sat across from me. He pretended to read, but I could feel him observing me closely. Another time, I walked out of a manicure appointment, and he was standing right outside. I was already having really high levels of stress about getting arrested. I kept hearing stories about other local dealers getting arrested. It reached a point that every time I left my house, I wondered if that would be my last time. Jerry's behavior made me stress even worse. Now I was also afraid for my physical safety. All that stress together was too much for me to handle. Even after years of therapy, that still weighs on me to this day. One day, Jerry approached me while I was about to enter a grocery store. He asked if I wanted to hear a poem he wrote. I said no thank you, left my cart there, and immediately ran into my car. But later that day, I asked my boyfriend for help, and my boyfriend said he would take care of the situation. He brought some friends with him, and they confronted Jerry. As far as I know, they didn't hurt Jerry, but they intimidated him enough to make him leave me alone. By that point, I knew I needed to leave that business. It really wasn't difficult to stop selling. I just told everyone I wasn't going to do it anymore. My customers had built a bond with me by that point, so some of them were a little disappointed. But I was by no means the only dealer in that area. I'm sure they found someone else to buy from. I hope they didn't actually, but they probably did. I have no idea what happened to Jerry after that. The silver lining in all of this is that Jerry really made me think about my safety. I avoid situations where I can't access help. This story takes place last February, while I was walking home from the gym at around 11:30 to midnight. I was walking home through a garden area near where I lived at the time in Dublin, Ireland. The area is near a church and a small housing estate that I lived in at the time. It's the kind of small community where everyone knows everyone. While walking home, I was listening to music, but staying vigilant as only a week or two before, while walking through a different park, I was followed for about 10 minutes, and I was paranoid of it happening again. For some context, this garden area had one road with no footpath that led to a car park, with a gate into the housing estate. I had looked behind me for a split second, and when I looked forward again, there was an old lady that I didn't recognize, wearing a white cardigan and dress that was very out of place for the cold February night, which was roughly 3 to 4 Celsius. She also was way too close for me not to have seen her before I looked back, because the only entrance to the area is through the gate I mentioned, meaning she must have been in the trees out of the light from the streetlights. This had scared me pretty bad already, but I kept walking. Just as I got close to her, she stopped walking and let out this really odd loud screech that scared me stiff. I just put my head down and kept walking. I had walked about 2 meters when I looked back to see her just gone. The part of the road I was on was a bridge over a small river with a very steep embankment that I would have trouble walking down. But this was the only place she could have went to get out of sight that quickly. Weirdly, I didn't hear her walk away, and if she had gone down the embankment, she almost would have fallen into the river, given the fact that she looked about 90 years old. And my friend had done that when we were about 10, trying to get his skateboard out of the river. The only explanation I could come up with is that she was some mentally ill person that had decided to scare the shit out of someone, but that doesn't even really add up, because in the full year I had been walking through there, I hadn't seen another person, so wouldn't she pick a spot where we're more likely to see a person at that time? Either way, it scared me enough that I started walking home a different way, and haven't gone back since. One of the benefits of my job is that I get to travel all around the world. It's taken me some amazing destinations, like Greece and Italy, although most of the time I stay within the US. A few years ago, my job took me to a mountainous region in the northeastern United States called the Adirondacks. If anyone's familiar with this area, you know what I'm talking about when I say it's beautiful in the fall. The leaves change and it makes the mountains look like you're in a fairy tale or something. It's incredible. Usually my job pays for a hotel, but this time I wanted to spend some much needed alone time in the mountains. So I went through Airbnb to find a secluded mountain home for the weekend. I found a beautiful home that was nestled in the trees and had an incredible view that looked down part of a mountain from the back deck. The place was exactly what I was looking for. There were a few trails right by the house that I could jog on in the morning. And as I said, the back deck had an amazing view that I could just sit and relax and take in all of the scenic beauty. For privacy reasons, I'm not going to reveal the name of the woman who posted the property on Airbnb. My work obligations were only in the late afternoon and early evening, so I could spend most of the time at the house. I got to the house later on Friday, and I didn't do much except have a few drinks on the deck. I called it an early night. I woke up at around 6 a.m. on Saturday and went for a jog on the trails that surround the house. You know that horrible feeling that you have when you're being watched? Well, I had that feeling for my entire jog. I blamed it on the anxiety of just being alone in the wilderness, since I'm technically a city person. After my jog, I took a shower and just hung out around the house for a few hours. I kept hearing weird noises, but once again, I just kept telling myself that it's my anxiety. I was in a wooden cabin up in the mountains. Of course, there were going to be all sorts of noises. I left the house a little after 3:30 in the afternoon and made my way into the town. I met my coworkers at a local restaurant and we took care of our business. After all that, we decided to go out for a few drinks. I didn't want to admit it to myself or anyone else, but I was freaked out to go back to my house. I don't know if it was the feeling of being watched and all that strange noise, or if the remote location was just a little too remote for me. Whatever it was, I was happy to take my time getting back. I even offered to have a little after party at the house, but my coworkers decided to turn a little before 10 p.m. I put the fear aside and made my way back to the house. I spent the entire drive trying to communicate with the irrational part of my brain that was freaked out. I repeated to myself over and over again that it's just a house. Houses make noises and I'm safe. I'll lock the doors and triple check that I've locked them before I go to bed. I got back to the house about 10:45. I was relieved how tired I was. Even with all my nerves, I was confident I could fall asleep. I did indeed check all the locks before I went to bed. I spent the next few hours tossing and turning. I would drift away for a little bit, and then hear something outside and be wide awake for 20 minutes. I tried turning on some music with my phone to drown out some of the noise, but the distraction of the music was keeping me awake. It was only a matter of time before I started hearing the noise again. Even with the music playing, it was a little after midnight when I decided to go smoke a cigarette and contemplate just leaving early since I was already wide awake. I grabbed my coat, my phone, and my cigs and made my way downstairs. The stairs came out into the living room, and if you turn left at the bottom of the stairs, you would see a large open room that served as a dining room and a kitchen. The back of the room had a sliding door that led to the back deck, which is my current destination. I took one step into the dark room and thought I could see a shadow in the kitchen that was causing some of the moonlight from the window to be obstructed. I felt that horrible pit in my stomach turn into a cyclone as I just stood there. I kept telling myself that it was just shadows and it was nothing to fear. I decided to confront my fear and turn the light on, and the image of what I saw is still burned into my brain and is one of the scariest images I've ever seen. Standing in the kitchen, clear as day, was a man. He was probably 6 feet tall with long, shaggy hair and a thick beard. I would say he was late 30s if I had to guess. There was a brief standoff where neither one of us did or said anything. It couldn't have been longer than 10 or 15 seconds, but that specific moment felt like it lasted hours. He was hunched over a bit and just staring at me with no notice. The man lunged at me with a false sprint. Thankfully, there was a counter in the middle of the kitchen, so he had to go around the counter, which gave me the time to run back to my room and lock the door. I realized that this is what stupid people do in horror movies, but at that moment it seemed like the best possible solution. For starters, I didn't think I could make it to the front or back door without getting caught first, and if I was able to escape, I didn't have my keys and I didn't know if this man had a weapon or something. So I wasn't about to just run aimlessly into the woods. My room seemed like the safest place because I could lock the door and call 911 and just hope that the door's integrity would last until the police showed up. So that's just what I did. I locked the door, ran to the closet, and called the police. I told them the address and to hurry. The woman from the dispatch stayed on the line and told me that someone would be there soon. While I was waiting, the man started to beat on the door. They seemed like violent strikes on the wood of the door. After each strike, he would say the weirdest things. Like he kept saying that he loves me and that he's changed. I got a good look at this man in the kitchen, and I knew without a doubt that I had no idea who this guy was. I started yelling back to the man that I didn't know him and that he had the wrong woman. But it's like he couldn't hear me. He just kept yelling about how much he loved me and that he needed me back. I could hear the door starting to break. When I looked, I could see his fist starting to penetrate the wood of the door from striking it repeatedly. I was so grateful that I heard sirens at this point. I heard several cars pull in, and they came at the perfect time. Just as the man was able to get his entire hand through the door, I heard a loud crash accompanied by the sound of the police yelling at the man. At the same time, I decided to jump out of the bedroom window, since it led to a small roof that I figured I could try to scale down. The crash I had heard right before was the police tackling the man to the ground, just as he was about to get into the bedroom. I flagged one of the officers from the roof, and he helped me get down. The police arrested the man, and he continued yelling incoherently as they put him in the back of the squad car. They called the owner of the house, and that's when we finally started to get a few answers. This guy was the ex-fiance of the woman who owns the house. Apparently, the guy had gone off the grid for a while after a bad breakup. The most disturbing part of all this was the guy had been living in one of the closets of the house for a few days. Inside the closet, they found a bunch of beer cans and snack foods. I don't know why he didn't act sooner, but I'm so thankful he didn't, because this could have ended a lot worse for me. If I had decided to get up for a smoke at that moment, the story could have had a much more tragic ending. The police told me that he had a knife from the kitchen inside his belt loop. It made me think to myself, I probably caught him in the act of getting the knife. The owner of the house felt horrible, and last I knew, the man was going to jail. But who knows? It's just so scary for me to think that I checked the lock 3 times, and it didn't even matter because the creeper's already in the house. I guess you never know what could happen. This may be the only time in history that going outside for a smoke saved a life. Hey everyone, I hope you all enjoyed those stories. With that said, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe. And if you have a story you want me to read, my Reddit's in the description. And as always, stay